That's right. I have wrestled with an alligator. I done tussled with a whale. I done handcuffed lightning, throw thunder in jail.
You can't stop me.
I'm going to win.
It ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward.
I won't quit.
I'll just keep getting stronger.
Stronger?
Stronger.
Yeah, okay. I just started it. Paul Oneid, you've been on here before. Now you're back on the pump and you're solo. But last time you were solo, you were never on your solo.
I was never on the pump solo. I was on the other podcast solo.
Yeah, that makes sense actually. Now it's lift free and diet hard. And you may or may not be getting an invite back there. You're kind of a power lifter with tattoos, so you might not get on there. You're not fit pro enough.
I'm not fit pro enough. I look pretty fit, but I'm not.
Well, we essentially this happened because you were in town at a powerlifting meet, like I want to say like 2-3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
For our buddy Kyle. Shout out to Kyle, benched
523.
523.
Sorry. 535.
530. It was like 33, but he came short of his like 1,800 pound total. But
that was a nasty job. That was like, shout out to me, Coach Me.
Yeah.
I believe that was like a 60 or 80 kilo PR total.
Yeah.
For him.
God.
Yeah.
This dude is like, he's probably one of the best benchers in Canada. He was just like always good at benching, but he never put it together. He was
dealing with some high hamstring tendinopathy. So he couldn't squat or deadlift anything meaningful in training and push his capacity. So, big props to him. We regressed him all the way down to doing like tempo RDLs with an empty bar to teach him how to brace. Tons of correctives and stuff like that to teach him how to breathe properly and go through appropriate pelvic rotation during movements. And he was able to build up some capacity and pulled 300 kilos, squatted 320, and then benched that 237.5 or something like that. Something stupid.
What's kind of cool, like I know we're bringing, like, so for anyone listening, we're going to talk about nutrition and this shit, but we call that OG lifters or whatever, but like guys who like came up through the ranks like within the last like 15 years, he just hadn't been exposed to any of that stuff. Like he literally interned at Dan Green's and just fucking lifted. And it's crazy how strong you can get, but then a lot of lifters probably resonate with that, but then it falls apart. And then now you're in that rebuilding phase, but it's totally, his is a cool story because he basically came back and has the best total he's ever had late in his career, it's just cool because I think a lot of people don't think that's possible. But if you learn how to lift, you can probably actually lift longer, which is a weird concept. It's as opposed to lifting in your 20s till you burn out and then you're off the circuit. So
I think what people forget is like in his case, he quote unquote like took a step back, but he's 31.
Yeah.
So if you're 31, you take 5 years off. He didn't take 5 years, he took a year. But if you take 5 years off, you're still 36 years old.
And strength, I think we've got this misconception that strength, like for most human beings, you get hurt, and so strength, you usually stop training as hard, whatever, and strength dissipates. But if you're talking about people who are elite strength athletes, it doesn't go away. I mean, look at the guys in World's Strongest Man that are pushing 50 that are doing insane things. Guys like Mark Felix. I mean, these guys are getting strong and stronger and stronger, and they're all guys that don't have a huge injury. And they also weren't like meteoric rises. I think some of these guys you see that were like 18, got on gear, and then had a 2,000 pound total, like, a year and a half later, they're gone in 2 years. Whereas these guys who make these like steady growth, pieces week after week, month after month, year after year, stay in the game a lot longer.
Yeah. I have a bit of I've chatted with a buddy of mine, Tony Montgomery, a few times about this, and there seems to be this like window of about 10 years. So from the moment you start competing at a really high level, taking part in the activities that you might take part in, you kind of have about 10 years of progress before it's going to taper off. If you're very aggressive, it's much shorter. So like myself as an example, I started competing when I was 23. I didn't take it seriously until I was about 26. From 26 to 29, I put like 350 pounds on my total, something stupid like that. but then started getting injured, started like realizing that, you know, I couldn't keep doing that. So my best totals came in 2015, 2016. But over the last couple of years, I'm starting to hit training PRs. I started hitting some PRs on the platform again. I PR'd my sleeve squat. I PR'd my deadlift. Now it's just a matter of putting it all together. And hey, guess what? 5 years later, after a knee surgery, 2 torn pecs, 2 torn quads, a torn IT band, maybe I'm going to be stronger again. But it just took a really, really long time.
Yeah. And we look at that in the grand scheme of things. It's like, yeah, it feels like, you know, a lifetime, but to do something better than you've done in your entire life, 5 years is really not that long, right? It just feels like it in an athletic career because, you know, a lot of athletic careers are 5 years.
Well, a lot of that nervous system stuff doesn't go away. Like even when I was training to lift over 700 pounds again, and I stopped because
745.
Did you guys know that Dean's deadlifted over 700? Did you know that?
I heard that.
Well, listen, I restrained myself when my wife got pregnant, and I'm gonna bring this closer. But anyways, I was training and I was like, oh damn, my strength came back in like literally 2 months. I went from deadlifting 500 for reps to like 600 for reps, and it didn't take that long. And I was like, oh sweet, I guess I didn't lose anything. But you don't really know, because in that interim of like I'm rebuilding or I'm trying to get better, you're lifting minuscule weights comparatively to when you're doing top sets of 2. But it's hard to look that far in the future and be like, you can get stronger. But that's where I think education on training just isn't there.
When you have to resist the urge to just go back to your old numbers because you're like, this is a waste. Like, I'm lifting 500 pounds. What's happening? It's not worth it.
Yeah, and like that never happens. Like, think about Paul 5 years ago. It's like, well, maybe you're a little bit level-headed, but people who generally aren't level-headed want to test things out all the time.
Oh, I wasn't. And that's good. Part of the reason why I got hurt so much.
Perfect.
I was never like I'm going to lift heavy all the time kind of guy. It was just like, I'm going to crush myself with volume all the time.
Yeah.
But you guys bring up an interesting point, and it'll segue nicely into a chat about nutrition. There are different lengths of adaptations in terms of like how long they take to accumulate and then how quickly they dissipate. So you look at maximal strength, it's primarily a neurological adaptation. It's how quickly can I recruit the muscle tissue that I have to apply force. That's really quick to develop. What's not quick to develop is hypertrophy. Yeah. Building that muscle takes so long. And if you go from a spot where you're super neurologically efficient, and then you have to take a step back for whatever reason, you're still accumulating volume, you're still accumulating fatigue, you might put on some muscle mass. Like, I am more muscular now at 225 than I was when I was 250. Mm-hmm. But I'm nowhere near as neurologically efficient. I also have less size on my joints, so my leverages are different. But I know that I'm going to be just as strong once I ramp up again, as long as I can continue to stay healthy. So it's like, all right, well, are we willing to take a step back to work on that hypertrophy, to build that tissue? And then just that's why you only need an 8-week peak or 6-week peak, because that neurological efficiency happens very quickly if you're smart about it.
Yeah, and then you start feeling really good, and then this is where I was like, I was almost good after I got pregnant, but I was feeling really good. I'm like, I could smash like 700 today. And then I was like, my coach was like, yeah, just don't. Got pregnant, quit. But I was like, this is the dangerous part, because that's where everyone gets to. They're like, yeah, I'm back, and then they're not back, because they definitely, because too quick, too fast. It's almost like you have to build up that capacity to train at that intensity, even though you can do it. It's like, don't fucking do it, which is hard.
And so we talk about building capacity, like we want to talk about nutrition.
Yeah.
You can train your metabolism the same way that you train the muscle. And that's something that, you know, I didn't really grasp until recently. And it wasn't until I really implemented it with myself and some of my clients that I really saw the benefits of taking your time and spending some time at maintenance. Like, we are always in this state of either I'm going to be in a deficit or I'm going to be in a surplus. And even labeling things as deficit, maintenance, and surplus, to me, is a little bit asinine.
Yeah, it's dynamic.
Those numbers are always changing. And they're changing on a daily basis. And then if you extrapolate out, like, your week might be a little less a little higher output or a little less intake or whatever. And that's going to affect your body weight. Your body weight should be a moving number. People think, oh, I'm going to weigh 225 every single day. It's just not true. And as you progress through a training block, your demands for intake will increase. And if you're not looking at all of the variables within that calories in, calories out equation, because that is the basis of energy balance, it's how do I maximize this energy balance equation so I get the most out of the work that I'm doing and I can put the most fuel into my machine.
Well, and this is where we started, because I don't even know if it'll be valuable to kind of go over your story, but in terms of a lot of the stuff, and this is where the conversation started with us, is we were talking about powerlifters, and I was like, I have this theory, or I've dealt with people with hypertrophy, myself included, and these things, I saw these things like, oh, I got some good shit. But when we're looking at general pop clients, we can be more simplistic in the sense where like this energy out equation, which is just like whatever, you can BMR, TDE, all this shit. But long story short is like a little bit of working out, more steps, and throwing more food in there has been helpful in this flux capacity. But there's a lot more cool shit when you have athletes who track variables like intensity, like volume, you know what I mean? Like training frequency. Because, and then you can manage fatigue, and then you're actually eating for fatigue, which is, we can use all the dynamics of that energy out equation to then gamify these energy in things, which doesn't get talked about because of, like you said, it's just like, I'm in a calorie deficit, I'm in a calorie surplus, it's calories in, calories out, and no one wants to be more complicated than that. And then you just end up getting either fat jack dudes or you just get people who are way too weak because they're in a quote unquote deficit. And I don't know, that's how this whole thing got started. So I don't know if you want to kind of talk about your journey so that we can kind of build upon that. But
so I coach. Yeah, Jeb, go ahead.
No, I just
No. I think I want to get into Paul's. Let's get Paul's background on it, and then we can really dive in.
Yeah, because I think your story is important. Because I want to make a joke here, but like you definitely were 240, and now, we're kind of look jacked, but now you look shredded, but you're way smaller in person now.
I know,
but you actually look more jacked in shirt off. But you just look smaller. With
so I've become like, you know how CrossFitters are like sneaky jacked, like they look like normal guys in t-shirts, and then they take their t-shirt off. Like, whoa, I'm kind of like that. I fill out like my t-shirt's just a bit bigger, but
say like NFL running back. That sounds better.
Actually, that's a great way of putting it. And then you have to basically like, you don't lead with your squat numbers, which hurts you because they'll see you and they'll be like, you're weak because your calves are small and you're kind of smaller in stature. And then if you said, hey, I squatted 800 pounds, they would rethink dieting. I think just the fact that you squatted 800 pounds would make them rethink dieting.
Like Dean is like talking to you like he's trying to fuck you in a bar right now. He's like negging you, like saying all these nice.
We could have a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. I just wanted to say that out loud. But I think that the sneaky jack thing is like a good testament to like, hey, this shit matters.
It does.
Because you were kind of fatter before, or not fatter, but like you're definitely going to be stronger and smaller at the same time, which is cool.
I had the typical like powerlifting body. Like I carried a lot of muscle mass, but I was fat. I didn't have necessarily visible abs. I didn't really have vascularity or anything like that. But the way in which that I've kind of conceptualized all this through my own journey is over the last couple of years, I've taken the approach of, I'm just going to exercise a lot. And that could be in the form of, usually it's in the form of steps. So getting between 10 and 12,000 steps a day. And then 2 to 3 times a week, I'll do some form of Metcon on top of that, whether it's between 30 and 45 minutes, something to just get my heart rate up and push my capacity a little bit. It's really not more complicated than that. I pick those workouts on the day based on how I'm feeling. Through that, I have increased my maintenance calories, if you want to call them maintenance calories on a weekly basis, by close to 1,000 calories. And in doing that, I also have decreased my body fat considerably. Yeah. And I walk around, like I still have veins in my abs when I'm walking around.
Yeah.
So to be able to do that, and then to still be able to recover from training, squat in the mid 5s for reps and sleeves, pull over 600 every week. These are things that previously at my heavier body weight, I was not able to do. And I don't simply attribute that to being leaner. I attribute that to having more food in my system on a daily basis, because my maintenance calories at 250 were the same as they are now at 225. And my aerobic base is higher. So we know from a physiological standpoint, if my aerobic base is higher, and it really doesn't take much to get it up there, like just steps for most people will get it up there. You can recover from more work, which means you can perform more work. The density of your training can be higher. Your recovery between sets is better. You have better oxidative capacity in the muscle to replenish glycogen. It makes training easier the more fit you are. So not only am I recovering better, but because my output is higher, my input can be higher.
Yeah.
And we get into this discussion of high flux. So the way in which I implement it with myself and my clients is we start at a baseline. Whatever, I meet them where they are. So I get them to, they do the 3-day tracking, see how many calories you're taking on average. Are you gaining weight or losing weight within the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, they're Gen Pop at that point. That's the cool part. Is they're literally as stupid as stupid, but they're like everyone else.
They're as inexperienced as everyone else. And I don't tell people what I'm doing. I don't tell people the goal of what we're trying to do is blah. And I say, okay, well, let's set a baseline for the number of steps you're going to take this week. Here's your calories. For the most part, I try to include some type of carb cycling. But I will only include it in the more bodybuilding sense, with a high day and a low day, with those individuals who are on point. Because if you can't adhere to it, there's really no point in doing it.
Well, and that's the cool thing and why I think even leading into this conversation, it's going to be a good distinction, but I think important is that you're dealing with athletes that generally listen, which is why we had such a cool conversation. Because with Jeb and I, we can assume certain things, but I would say we don't get that same leeway, which again stops the amount of stuff we can do. So it's cool because people listen, which is a huge thing.
I would say that the majority of my clients do not fall into the fully adherent category. No, they don't. And even if they are fully adherent, it's not going to be to the level that I would be. I'm of the understanding that I'm a robot when it comes to nutrition. I count everything, and that's just the way I operate, and it makes me happy. That's fine. Most people aren't like that, but so I will start off with this baseline. Even in the most basic form of diet, I will include intra-workout nutrition. Even if your outside nutrition is taken care of and it's good, having a little bit during training, especially with a powerlifter whose training sessions typically range above that 1 hour mark, it's going to make a difference. So I usually use the diabetic guideline for carbohydrate intake beyond 1 hour. So it'd be 10 grams of carbohydrates per 15 minutes of exercise beyond 1 hour. And that's a starting point. So they'll have their base diet, and then on training days, they're allowed to have this intra-workout shake on top. So that's our base diet. Whatever the steps are, that's where they're going to start. Mm-hmm. Before I touch the calories, I get them to at least 8,000 to 10,000 steps a day. Once we're there, I will touch the calories. I will generally, it depends if they're trying to lose weight or not. I will get them to a point where we can maintain their body weight at that new 10,000 steps. Once we're there, typically what I'll see is you'll have 2 weeks of weight maintenance, even if you've increased the calories, and then there'll be a huge drop. And I don't have any hard data to point to, but from an anecdotal perspective, it always follows 2 to 3 weeks of maintenance, and then their weight will plummet. And that to me is that indication of, okay, I know this person's training hasn't necessarily changed too drastically because they're still training like a powerlifter.
And you're controlling it because they're usually these are your clients in the powerlifting sense, which is cool.
Yeah. So my training, the way that I train is I would say more like power building. Like there's a lot of bodybuilding work in there. I do a lot of time restricted stuff. So I know that their caloric output of training is relatively higher compared to other powerlifters.
Yeah. And that's a huge distinction because I know you make people work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you've done it. So
yeah, so
the, from there, okay, so we're at this maintenance level, and then we see this plummet in body weight. Well, now I know we're working here, because then I know, okay, our metabolism is picking up. Now I start to slowly increase the food. And when I say slowly, like we're talking 40 to 60 calories a day per week. So these aren't massive modifications to the nutrition. It's 15 carbs, 5 fats type thing. I tend to keep the fats very stable, and usually within that 20 to 30% of total calories for the most part. If it's a female, a little bit higher. If it's a male, maybe closer to that 20% mark. And then if they are an enhanced athlete, you could play with that a little bit more. But that's where we get to the conversation of where do you want to go with your body weight?
Right. And this is actually where I want to stop. I want to actually step back a little bit. And Jeb, if you have any questions here, is that the cool thing about what you're doing is you're not necessarily starting in a deficit to drive Flux later. And that's, I think, the difference with our clients is that we're using Flux after, because it's like, how do we maintain weight loss, which is in performance sense, it's a difficult, you're almost recomping and using Flux to drive the recomp. And then they end up losing weight anyways, because the Flux goes up, and then you can fuck with even more calories or whatever. Yeah. But that's a cool concept, because I don't even know if that's necessarily, because we still, with what we deal with, I think that there's some clients that can be considered that. Like we have some CrossFitters or like some people that are already working out pretty decently. And that might be
my athletes, for sure, this is more the approach I take. The difference being is that the majority of people we work with are fat loss clients, and you have to hook them with weight loss initially. So the fact that you're able to take people and say, like, listen, the weight's not really important, performance is important. Let's use this Flux model to drive the potential for recomp, and then if weight starts going down, we get to increase calories, because we don't necessarily want weight to go down. We just want body comp to improve, which is really fucking cool.
Well, and this is where maybe I have a question on this part is like, I asked James Krieger this, and like, again, we didn't really have any answers, but do you think driving more food, because even though there's more energy expenditure, essentially you're driving more carbs is what's happening. Yeah. Do you think that the increase in performance is aerobic based, or do you think it's a lot of, just energy availability and like having more Flux, or both? I'm sure it's probably a little bit of both, but that was the cool conversation with this, is increasing food probably help their training.
Yeah. So we have to remember that food is thermogenic as well. So the more I feed this person, the higher they're going to rev that engine. So keeping that in mind, the reason I start with introducing Flux immediately is because I want to protect that training session with every ounce of my being, because these are performance athletes. That training session is everything to them. Whereas a bodybuilder, the training serves a means to mold the physique. With a powerlifter or a performance athlete, that training session is the stimulus for which they are performing. It is the means and the ends. Okay. So I'm protecting that training session, making sure that they stay well fed. Once that Flux is there, I would say that it's more a function of the higher amount of turnover. So you're getting better nutrient partitioning right off the bat because you are more active. So you're more insulin sensitive. Then I also advise on food choices during this process, like whole single ingredient foods, fruits and vegetables, things of that nature, like the not so fancy stuff, because I know that that's going to maximize their insulin sensitivity as well. If I keep driving carbs and I don't take those precautions, quote unquote, then we might get into maybe they're getting a little bit chubby as we increase the calories. But maintaining insulin sensitivity with the exercise, driving good quality foods and carbohydrates, that training session is just going to be even more productive. What I'll do for my fat loss clients is I'll just make the discrepancy in calories between rest days and training days huge.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So then I'll show them, like, so at the top of all their check-in sheets, I'm very transparent with everything I do with my clients as well. So like, I want them to know exactly what we're doing and how we're going to accomplish it. So I don't tell them right off the bat that we're going to do a Flux diet or something like that. I'm just going to let them know we're going to drive your steps up. This is what it's going to do for us. My initial intake email to my clients is like 3 pages of a Word document typed out. Just laying out exactly what I like to do. And once we have that set, it's their macros are at the top, their calories for each day, and then in a little green box is their average calories for each day of the week. And they see that number dropping if they're trying to lose weight, but they see their training day macros get higher and higher.
That's cool.
And
Even psychologically.
And I found that that's pretty significant in terms of the results that they can get, because we're protecting that training session. With the clients that aren't able to adhere that much to it, it's the same as a Gen Pop client. We just gradually decrease the calories as we need to, but that flex stays high. And we keep that intra-workout nutrition in there at all times.
Fucking I like that way of doing things, because even with the steps, it's like, even as introducing that as like the baseline, it's like, I even find with Gen Pop people, but for everyone, like, that's not a hard ask. It's like 10 steps is more than 1, 100 is more than 10, so it's a fucking easy metric. It's easy to count, and like the only logistical problem is life, and if you can't figure that out, like, honestly, you're fucked anyways.
The other thing for me is that it also it works to offset metabolic adaptations, because it's not exercise activity.
No.
So it's not stressing the system. So you're allowing for that true NEAT to actually increase without, seeing more metabolic adaptations in that sense.
This is maybe where there's a question in there, because I know you, and like we talked about your story, but like you legitimately do a lot of athletes. Have you found that the steps, at least the initial, because I think protecting that training session is, a lot of people think like more steps, even though it's not exercise, it's going to kind of ruin that. Have you found that to be true, or like do you have any, I guess,
you're talking about like an interference effect?
Yeah, is there any interference? And again, I know the answer probably, but it's like
the answer is that no, because and I'm going to say a hard no, because you're like, okay, you want to have your conditioning work at least 6 hours prior to training or 24 hours after for no interference effect. You're fucking walking.
Yeah.
Right.
If walking makes you a worse athlete, you're either Andre Milanichev or you're Betty Crocker, okay? Like, you're shit or you're the best. Because if you're so unfit that walking interrupts your ability to train, you have much bigger problems than the weight that you're putting on the bar.
Right.
And what does your training look like?
Exactly.
If you can't walk, like, your training's got to be dog shit. You spend 3 hours in the gym for 10 minutes of work.
And this is where it's like, this is why it's a different conversation than with Krieger's, because we were using vests, which again, it is walking, but the energy expenditure is definitely up for that. And I've dealt with that where it's like they think adding a vest for walking, or even like you've done sled work, like I've seen you do light sleds. Yeah. That's not, definitely not.
Krieger's vest though. Krieger's vest is different though, because Krieger's vest is not about adding NEAT. It's about adding weight that has been lost. So it's about affecting the gravitastat within the cell or bone matter, not about.
I listened to that podcast. It's really interesting.
It's
when there's
really
a lot of unanswered questions with it. That's why this is kind of cool, because there's like, I'm asking you these questions because those are essentially the ones I was asking without the vest. And
so I've done the vest. I've worn like I have a 15 pound, or I think it's 18 pound vest. And I will wear that on some of my walks, but when we're dealing with performance, we have to say, okay, how can I get the most out of the least?
Yeah.
Right. So it's, my training is the most important. Yeah. So if I want to continue to accumulate fatigue, quote unquote, in terms of steps, those steps need to be the least impactful possible.
Yeah. 100%.
So if I'm far away from a meet, then I might put a vest on and go for a walk, because realistically, a 15-pound vest.
Yeah, that's not.
If I was going to school and had a backpack on, it'd be heavier than that.
Yeah, and if you're hiking up a hill, like a
Right, exactly.
But a ruck is still can be a systemically fatiguing thing.
Yeah.
I mean, rucks wreck people.
Well, that's why I wanted to ask, because I know, like, again, I know what you do, but it's, I think people do confuse that, because then they take steps. Like, it's just inherent, and especially with athletes, probably they try to find the best or the hardest version of this fucking low intensity thing. It's like, no, now it's not that thing. Like, it's fucking
exactly. So it's I want to hit home with this too. It's not about the number of steps you get in a day. It's like a single day. It's the number of steps you get consistently every single fucking day.
It's the adaptation.
Get your 10,000 steps. I don't care if you have 5,000 steps on one day, 20,000 steps on the next day. Great, cool. You got a high five for your 20,000 steps. Where's my other 5,000 on that day?
Yeah.
The consistency of effort, that's what we're looking for. Over the week, are we on average getting close to or at that 8 to 10,000 step mark? Then it's, okay, are we being consistent with our macros and hitting them? Okay, are we sleeping? We haven't even gotten to sleep, because if you're not sleeping, throw Flux out the window, it doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah.
If you're super stressed, doesn't matter. It's covering these big rocks that are going to make the difference. And when we get into this position of looking at the athlete in terms of what we're using the nutrition for, I want to be turning over as much protein as I can and accumulating as much tissue as I can, so I can use that tissue to build to put pounds on the barbell. How do I do that? Well, I need to eat a lot of food. How do I use the most of that food? I need to have a higher output. So it all feeds into itself, right? The other thing with people forget is, as I feed you more, you're going to have more energy. So you're going to want to be more active. So that's when it comes into, if you're trying to gain weight, this is a really challenging model.
It's fucking real tough.
It's real tough, but it
actually
works.
It actually, and we were talking about this with James Krieger, and the more I thought about it, it's actually very counterproductive, because especially when you're talking about, like, one of the big things you hit on here is like, hey, we need to be eating higher quality foods. If you're trying to gain weight, higher quality foods are increasing your thermic effect. You're actually going to be, burning more calories in that. So and then moving more.
You were part of my process. It took me fucking 4 months to get the needle move, and I increased calories about like it was 1,000 and then 1,200.
Dude, it happened to me too.
And my knee kept going up because I kept fucking putting more food in, and it offset it till it didn't, and it was counterproductive. And what I didn't.
COVID's the only way I gained weight, is because everything stopped. Once I had to sit inside, is the only time I could gain weight.
Well, this is where again.
Just wait, you're forgetting the point, right?
No, I'm not. I want to eat more.
The point is to eat the most amount of food, to have the highest amount of training output possible, and recover from training. I don't fucking care if the scale doesn't move. If you're getting stronger, we're putting on muscle mass.
Yeah.
So if your goal is to actually gain weight, well, guess what? We're measuring all the metrics. Just decrease your needs slightly. And it doesn't have to be crazy. It could just be, all right, I want to start gaining some weight. I'm going to go from 10 to 9, or from 9
potentially.
to 8.
But here's where we run into, again, we talk about this. We talked about this earlier about when we talk about metabolism being a fluid dynamic thing, is part of the problem when you get into this flux model, when your body becomes, metabolically flexible, you're moving things well, you change one thing and your body's so smart that it just goes boop, and it'll fix it a little bit. And like Dean said, it just takes, we try to do this, and that's why I agree with you on the moving things slowly, is because it almost tricks the body into not compensating as quickly. I've noticed when I do a higher calorie raise, sometimes that compensation kicks in harder, but if we kind of slowly raise it, that's where we kind of get that thing. So going that opposite direction a lot of times is hard, because your body's like, cool, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. And
this was our main sticking point. This was our main not even sticking point when we were talking about this at the bar. A perfect place to talk about. Yeah. You had a steak and I had a burger because I'm more Flux than you. But so this is where I do want to touch on this because what you did, because a lot of it is hunger. So that's the negative part about gaining weight with the high flux is hunger fucking drops. That's what the study showed is like, that's why it's a good weight loss maintenance tool. You never had that problem, even though I did. But the main difference was, if I remember correctly, was you used cardio and then you used shitty food after the fact. So you hadn't found it as hard again. But I do want you to touch on that because our main sticking point is it's really hard, but you seem to have a fairly decent solution that I never thought about at the time.
So number one is because we're using intra-workout carbs, you can fucking shuttle a shit ton of carbs in.
Yeah, so this is cool, Jeb. This is where
so like I'll have people like 150, 200 grams of carbs. Maybe
you
up
said you had more sometimes.
Yeah, so I had one guy, his total calories are up to like 7,000, but he was eating about 500 carbs within his intra-workout windows.
Good.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, like we were able to protect his insulin sensitivity because on off days he was at maintenance or quote unquote maintenance. The other thing I do is I'm a big believer in these micro adjustments because just as you said, Jeb, metabolic adaptation happens quick. You see it in weight loss all the time. Oh, I'm just going to eat 1,200 calories. Okay, you eat 1,200 calories, you lose weight for a little bit, and then you plateau.
Done.
But had you decreased by maybe 50 calories a week, that plateau would have happened much later. You would have lost more total fat or total body weight. Same thing happens with weight gain. So if we're making these adjustments, okay, say we're at maintenance, we're at 10,000 steps and 5,000 calories. Eating 5,000 calories of good food, it's very, very, very challenging. So what am I going to do? I'm just going to bring you to 9,000 steps. Just a small adjustment. See what happens. Mm-hmm. We're not in any rush to do anything, right? We're just seeing what happens with the body. If if nothing happens, then we'll drop it down. If you're at 8,000 steps, personally, I'm a big believer that you need to be active during the day. So I'm not going to ask people to go much below 7,000 or 8,000 steps. If we're at that 5,000 calorie mark, that's when we have to start looking at, okay, let's start maximizing this intra-workout window. So we're having, a small carbohydrate shake as we're walking into the gym. We're having a massive carbohydrate dump during training. We're having some fast digesting carbs, usually like cereal or something really easy to digest with some whey protein. And then we start choosing more palatable foods. So now we're getting into, cream of rice versus rice. Now we're getting into honey, fruit. Like fruit is easy to eat. It's palatable. It doesn't fill you up. But
I hate you because you're not saying pizza. I was like, fuck you, man.
I'm not saying pizza because if you're just driving fats, so here's the other factors. I'm very cognizant of health. High carbohydrates don't cause type 2 diabetes. High carbohydrates and high fats together cause diabetes, right? So if we're looking at driving calories, we want to make sure that they're as high quality as we can get. If that person goes out once a week and wants to have a cheat meal, as long as they don't eat less total calories than I've prescribed for them, I'm okay with that. But
now, what are you putting in as high fat too? Because I think that's also because we drive such low fat diets that I think, I'm going to take someone up into 100 grams of fat with absolutely no qualms about it. Because I do think that driving that fat is actually a really beneficial way to
on rest days. I do.
Yeah, so like that's a great way to do it. Talk about metabolic flexibility right there, man. Is like, give them a higher fat day on rest days and higher.
And that's like that's not fat. Like, you know what I mean? When we talk about like fat ass fucking people, we're talking like 150 plus. Like, and we've had this talk before. So
right.
Like 100 would be high for all.
That's high for me.
Yeah, that's high for me.
So I'm going to give you a concrete example. So I had a client. He was a 275 lifter. Used to walk around at like 255, wanted to actually gain weight to fill out that weight class. I had him up to, I think it was 100. So I had him up to 145 grams of fat on his non-training day.
Yeah, so you're not going
I'm not going too crazy.
You're reasonable here. So
he's still close to 500 carbs on that day.
Yeah.
And then on his training day, he's down in that 75 grams of carbs range.
Yeah.
But he's up closer to 900 grams of carbs.
Yeah, and see that sounds like a bodybuilder diet.
It
right?
is.
Like that doesn't sound like
Yeah.
anything crazy, right?
And then if you want to get really fun with it, you can start having them take insulin. I don't do that, but it's just something you could
You've had
do.
I
people
mean,
that
there's
tried
there's a
insulin.
lot of
I've done it
advantages
myself.
physiologically.
And
Yeah.
like personally, I get fat really easy. So I got quite fat, but I gained a lot of weight and I was really fucking strong. So for me at the time, it was a good trade-off. But there are things from a dietary perspective that you can do to play around with it. Like the Stan Efferding talks about this with the vertical diet. So when people are dieting, he has them eat oranges. When people are not dieting, he has them have orange juice. It's just more palatable.
That's an old Paul Quinn thing.
Yeah, it's old. It's tried and true. It works like a charm.
Yeah, well, it's like we were talking with Tibbs about this. It's like one of the things that I do if people are trying to gain weight is just a simple switch from 93.7 ground beef to 90.10 or 85.15. It's just more calories, and it's the same thing as
That's
oranges
where
versus
it's
orange
and that's where it's like I say pizza and like I don't think I had this conversation. It was someone else, maybe it was Kyle. Anyways, I was like, when I say pizza, it's like frozen pizzas, as much as they're processed, they're actually not that high in fat. So like if I were to have fucking Pizza Hut, yeah, I'm hitting 170 grams of fat. But those stupid pizzas, it only ends up being like
that off by
balls of like 40 grams of fat. I'm eating so clean, like it's hard to hit 100. So yeah, I should preface that by saying I'm actually not that high in fat.
So I was just like, I haven't been tracking it all. And like, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna start tracking my days, not change anything, just see where I'm at. And just because of my own habits, my fats were at like 55 grams a day. And that's eating like 90-10 ground beef, eating steak, like eating things, but I just don't eat a lot of fat. I eat a lot of like lean ground chicken, lean chicken breast, a lot of vegetables, but just that's where I'm at. And it was like, oh, okay, like I actually probably need a little bit more fat just on the daily.
Well, so do you like realistically?
I mean, from a hormonal standpoint, we probably do. I mean, granted, I'm on TRT, so I don't really. But from a normal Gen Pop person, yeah.
So that's where I'm gonna come to next. So it's like we talk about this calorie range of fats, like 20% is like the basement that you want to go to for hormonal, but that doesn't have to be every day. Like if my rest days are at 40% fat, well, I can drive down my fats on training days and just focus on getting as much carbohydrates in as I can. The problem is you're going to run out of calories really quick. Like you're not going to have enough calories from just carbohydrates. So you will need a little bit of fat to fill out those calories. But the problem with driving up fats at the same time as carbohydrates, aside from the insulin sensitivity, is you're going to get really full because those fats will slow gastric emptying. And if you're not moving through the food fast enough, you won't be able to get enough food in at once. The other thing you can play with, and I've only had to do this with a couple clients, is play with meal frequency. So instead of having them eat 5 meals a day, I just have them eat 6 or 7, and they're just much smaller.
Well, that's where like this is where it's like this is what I want to talk about it because it's like the weight loss thing. Not that it's easy, but that's really cool. It's this gaining weight part. But you also drove cardio too. So like, I guess the question is like, what are the best ways you found to increase this and combat the problem of essentially hunger, but getting more food in without being a total fucking piece of shit? Because again, that's the first place people go, even fluxed or not.
Especially powerlifters.
You have to eat like a fucking loser to do this. And I don't necessarily agree with that.
I don't agree with it either.
Stuff.
I don't agree with it either. And it comes down to the palatability of the foods for me. So number one is I will decrease the flux slightly. So I'll get them to drop their steps maybe 2,000 from where they were at. 10,000 is kind of my baseline maximum. Some people go over that on their own. Like
you can't avoid this.
For me, I was like, okay, I'm going to do 10,000 steps a day. Within 3 weeks, 12,000 was my average. And I was like, okay, cool. Like that's fine. So I'll drop the goal down to 8. So I'll have them moving a little bit less. That will allow them to be a little bit hungrier. Then I get into more palatable foods and maximizing that intra-workout window. So in that intra-workout window, we can have, it's usually liquid nutrition. There's 0 fats associated with it. And they're very highly palatable foods post-workout. Then we're eating, because it's so palatable, it's because it's so easy, then we're eating a real meal within about 60 to 90 minutes after that. So that means within that 30 minutes pre-workout to an hour and a half post-workout, I could be having, 50 carbs before, 100 during, 100 after, and then another 100 of real food.
And we're talking like powders, basically. Like
For the first three,
highly-
yeah. So we have
cereal,
like a
right?
50-gram shake, 100-gram shake, 100-gram cereal, 100-gram real meal.
Yes, you're hacking it. That's what I wanted to know, because like essentially, like if you don't do that, you're cut, and you're not.
It's
you
going to
don't,
be
like,
hard.
eat food. It's
Yeah,
fucking
and
hard.
this is how I've set this up for years personally. I don't no, none of my clients get days like this because I work with General Pop. There's nobody ever, but yeah, like for me, that's all. And really, it comes down to like kind of that. It's that bodybuilder model, and it's keeping fats out of the workout window, even though some fats is probably not. Some fats is probably good to keep some hypoglycemia from happening, because I can get a big dump. But just keeping that out. And then because what I do is I generally have almost no carbs at breakfast, because I want to get more fats in at breakfast. And then my dinners are pretty, but you're right. When you start to work in that workout window, even though from a muscle glycogen standpoint, it's negligible. Like it really is. I mean, just from the research, we know that we're not actually burning through muscle glycogen really that fast. But from a caloric standpoint and from a psychological standpoint, I've always trained much better with that, pushing that in that.
That's
window.
where I like, and that's where I would wonder, like, because a lot of it is psychological, like truly, like, because even though we know muscle glycogen, blah 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 blah, if I'm fucking like smashing a shake, I'm like, oh yeah, I can push harder than this next set.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you're almost turning off your inhibitions for that stuff to eat more food. Where normally, if you're just sitting there, you're like, I'm not hungry, but then
you're getting a boost of serotonin from the carbohydrates.
Okay, yeah.
But the other thing too is, Jeb, you mentioned glycemia. Like you can take advantage of that glycemic response, right? So you crank up your insulin, then it drops. Fucking eat. Like you can eat so much more.
Oh yeah. You can crush.
Right?
Yeah, it's like nothing matters. Those are the good times. That's where that's where you use cardio to some extent. Like, because that's
you. So I like cardio. I think it's fun. Like I like doing conditioning work. But for most of my clients, I don't prescribe it. I don't prescribe it because typically it's, number one, it's tough to know what their daily recovery is going to be like. And number two, they don't like it. Very, very few people like it. Like I'll go in and I'll crush like some, like a Metcon I did the other day was like a 10 cal air bike sprint, and then kettlebell snatch burpees and like a 10 to 1 ladder. And so it's 10 rounds. It was 100 total calories in the air bike, 55 kettlebell snatch burpees with, I think it was a 32 kilo bells. Like it was heavy. But like I was fucking like breathing fire. I was loving it. And people don't want to do that.
But you do use that because like you get hungry as shit after.
Yes.
If you want to, in we're talking about gaining, and I know we're kind of stuck on this, but
for the gaining weight, I tend not to do stuff like that unless the person is like very, like, for me, it's adherence, right? So it's, if you're not adherent to it 100%, there's no point in doing that. I would much rather just have you keep your steps consistent day to day. You can use that as a variable, drive the carbohydrates as high as you can get them, and then have your body weight move in the right direction. But when it comes to like, can we talk about drugs? Are we good to talk about drugs?
Yeah.
We opened up that can of worms. Really,
Okay, so I deal with a lot of untested athletes, and it's the biggest mistake that I see. So usually the times in which they're trying to gain weight is off season.
Yeah.
What are the drugs that you're going to see the biggest gains in body weight the fastest? Orals. What are the drugs that affect your appetite the most? Orals. So number one, they jump on orals in the off season. Stupid. Okay. Mm-hmm. Our liver is our biggest metabolic organ. Like we don't want to fuck with our liver. We want to keep it as happy as possible. That's why I include fruit in my diets. That's why I do mostly whole single ingredient foods. We need to keep our liver happy. That is probably the biggest cause of hunger issues in athletes that I will see. As soon as someone says, Paul, man, my appetite dipped, I'm like, what did you add? Immediately. And 9 times out of 10, I just started taking some D-ball. Okay, boom, cut it out. Cool. You don't need it. You're going to get more gains from eating more food than you are from taking D-ball and struggling to shovel food in your face. Because not only is it affecting your appetite is a cue. Like, people forget, appetite is a neurological stimulus that you want to eat. You want to fuel your body. If your body is telling you not to put food in it, that means that it's not stable and there's something wrong. It's not going to be processing your food properly.
And we just think about too, you add on the water retention aspects to it. You add in the feeling like shit, the lethargy.
Yeah.
Like, you're totally right. Like, it's the, you know, the poor, these are supposed to be in season. I mean, if you look at why these drugs were developed, particularly the way they were utilized in the Eastern Bloc, they're used in 3-week cycles, one off, which is why periodization looks like it does. So yeah, pound it 3 weeks, go in, and then you've got a competition. It's out of your system. Great. Yep. But you're right. I mean, you're adding all the things in the off season that are going to take away from your ability to do what you want to do in the off season.
And I see it leading up to meets too. So a lot of what I do leading up to meets is probably the most important thing with regards to Flux that we can do. Yeah. What I'm seeing, and I work with some higher level lifters, and I work with some not so higher level lifters. The higher level lifters will usually rest above their weight class, and then we'll either have to water cut them down or not. Here's where Flux is so fucking amazing. Okay. So I have a lifter, they're probably 10 pounds over their body weight. Let's say that's around 7% body weight. So it's a reasonable cut. Mm-hmm. Their training volume drops. Calories are the same. Steps are the same. Body weight comes down, right? Because they're recovering more. Body weight will come down. I haven't touched their water. Next, their training frequency comes down. Calories are the same. Steps are the same. Body weight comes down. And when I say body weight comes down, it could be just a pound, half a pound, something like that. Still coming down. Yeah, inflammation's down. Now, I say, okay, rest day calories only. So their carbs come down, but their calories are close to the same. A couple more pounds come off. Steps stay the same because we need those steps to help keep driving the metabolism, help with the recovery, help with the movement, blood flow, all that stuff. I've just dropped 4 or 5 of that 10 pounds, and I haven't touched their water. I haven't touched anything. It is the easiest way to cut weight ever. You water load for 2 days, tell them not to eat breakfast, 10-pound weight loss, no worries, no harm, no foul. Mm-hmm. Then, because they've dropped all that water, their appetite is spiked. Mm-hmm. And we can start eating.
Well, that's, I think, like the sweetest part about it is like, essentially you're using food where it's commonly a held belief that is the negative part because of weight gain and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if you're actually smart about it, this goes back to like getting your nutrition online is helpful. But like, once you actually track stuff and manage it and use your fucking brain.
Food's a PED, man. Food is a PED. Yeah. People forget about that. You have to get your body to a position where it's using it to the highest level.
But no one talks about this stuff. That's why it's like people don't fucking get it.
I think for weight cuts too, like you said, I used it with my girl for America's Strongest America's Strongest Woman for her.
Great job, by the way.
Dude, she killed it. She killed it. But exactly what you said is, so what I did with her that was different is I was like, hey, you gotta get your steps and you gotta get your cardio leading up to the meet. Like for about 10 weeks out, I was just like, she's like, I hate walking. I was like, tough. This is going to be part of your program. And her strength coach is a friend of mine too. So he's like, yeah, get out and do it. So we got her walking. But like you said, when we led into the meet, I mean, she was at like 152, I guess, when we would normally start her water load. She's expecting to cut all the calories. And I'm like, no, I was like, we're about 4 days out. I was like, we're just going to cut starchy carbs. You get to get all your calories still, just lots of vegetables. She was eating up until the day before. I'm like, came water cut time. And I was like, yeah, you don't have to sweat or anything. I was like, just cut out water at midnight tonight and go in. And she went in, weighed in at 139. And she lost like 10 pounds, which is like a 20% cut for her, with zero sweating, zero crazy calorie restrictions. And like you said, it was just that because she was going into this high flux state, once you just pulled the water from the carbs out, it was just like,
well, and that's the commonly held belief, especially for a lot of people that don't even read about water cutting. first thing happens is like you have these big guys eating 1,100 calories, fucking fatigued as fuck from.
She was
essentially
eating
being
1,300 the day before.
Yeah, I think.
And then, like you said, she woke up the next morning, did her, got her IV, everything done. She was starving and ended up getting up to like, I think she was like 158 by that night. Like she put on like 15, 18 pounds or something crazy.
Part of me wants to do, so I'm competing in February again, and part of me wants to just see if I can be an N=1 study for this, but I kind of want to go to 198 because I'm so fucking small right now.
Well, but if you think about it, you could theoretically, you're using this to make the cut not hard. But let's assume that having a harder cut will allow you, like a harder water cut, higher percentages will allow you to be more competitive at the lower body weight. You're still going to have all that fatigue and all that bullshit, but you can have the rebound. But you can essentially train 6-7 pounds higher than a normal big cut because you could do those same things and then have the normal big cut process.
Theoretically, I don't know if
interesting to see if that's what fucking what's his name
Ben Pollock.
Yeah, Ben Pollock. I wonder if that's how, because he's very smart, but he had way bigger cuts than everyone, and that's why he fucking set all the records. Like,
yeah, he also, from what I've heard, loves Lasix. So
yeah. But again, take that same concept is like you can still train at 7 pounds higher and still do all the crazy bullshit. But now you have an extra, and as you get a higher weight percentage, so it'd be interesting to see if you could.
It would be interesting. I'm also of the thought that like I'm not gonna, like, even if I'm competitive in this competition, I wouldn't do it just to win a fucking competition.
Right.
I'm
That's
gonna
the
do
problem.
it.
Is like
Right.
you're literally, this is the cool part about
I'm
being
not good
strong.
enough.
You're not even that strong anymore.
Fuck, man. So on that note, I checked the other day. So
Might be at 198.
my total at 220 when I did it in 2015 was number 18 all time. My squat was 8th. So at one point I was, right now.
No, your squat was pretty fucking high though.
8th, 7th, no, 7th or 8th, something like that.
And then 3rd in Canada or something.
Right now, my total at 220 is 89th.
What would it be at 198? Did you check at 198?
It'd be pretty good at 198, maybe top 20, top 30.
Yeah, so you still,
but it's not, honestly, it would just be a fun experiment, but I don't think my kidneys can handle that.
Yeah, it would just be cool because, again,
I do have a ton in my closet, but I don't need that.
But if we use it as performance, this is the
I don't know about the Lasix, man. Like I'll use just the dandelion root, just not and I don't use it as a diuretic. What I do is I actually use it to drive pissing basically the 5 days before. So driving, I actually use it during the water load to get them pissing out more water, not as that actual diuretic at the end to strip it all out. And then I'll drop it out before, and then when they cut the water out, it's a lot less. But like Lasix, like I know bodybuilders and like high level people.
Like Mexico, I walked right into the pharmacy, got 200 tabs, and I haven't used any of it because I just bought it just in case.
Just in case.
But
yeah, that's like you said. It's just the kidney risk that it's just not worth it.
As a hobbyist powerlifter,
hobbyist powerlifter. Yeah, it's not.
But like John Meadows won't even use it for his bodybuilding prep guys. He says they don't need it. He's like, I've got guys winning shows all the time without it.
Okay, so that's a really interesting point. You brought that up. So look at the most productive periods of bodybuilders' careers is that 3 to 4 weeks post show, where their calories are driven up so fucking high and they've just built this humongous aerobic base.
Yeah.
The reason I don't think that they're able to carry that through is because they don't keep up the aerobic base. So
I think that's,
imagine you just put yourself in a position. Yeah, maybe you don't go through that enormous caloric deficit, but you go through that experiment of, I'm going to eat as much food as I can, and I'm going to do cardio twice a day. I'm going to weight train, all that stuff. Who's to say that wouldn't, like from a theoretical standpoint, you're going to be pushing so much nutrients through your system because your blood is always pumping.
Eric Salazar, that was that one. Like he's natural, but like fucking like theoretically his cut was, because at his weight levels he's like fucking like, what is it, Jeff, like 160. Anyway, the amount of calories he's eating for that weight level were like unheard of in terms of bodybuilders, because it's like we need to be at like whatever 1,100 calories and stuff, and he's eating like 1,900. And so it's cool because I think that it is a theory because no one's trying it, because again, the tried and true methods are tried and true and they don't want to fuck with that. But it's like this.
But you're seeing more and more bodybuilders who are more evidence-based are starting to move into this driving steps, because what they're seeing is beta oxidation is better, lipolysis is better. So you're still able to gain muscle, but you're able to utilize fats better. You're able to obviously utilize carbs better. It's that Mike T. Nelson metabolic flexibility idea. And so they're starting to realize that they're able to gain weight the same without going into this, old school Jay Cutler fucking just become a massive marshmallow and then have to cut it down. I mean, these guys still are going up to 300 pounds and getting down to 240, which is fucking crazy. But I think you're seeing more and more of them, like you said, start to drive this post-show activity because they're realizing the benefits are there. They might, and maybe you have to eat a couple 100 calories more per day because you walked for a little bit. Fine.
Yeah. But you're going to be using them.
And your heart is working. And your cells, your metabolic health is higher. And you're, like you said, then you're using the calories. Whereas if you don't utilize these methodologies, you're probably not using all the calories you're consuming. You're probably wasting a shitload, leaving stuff on the table.
Well, it comes down to nutrient partitioning too. Right?
Absolutely. 100%.
As soon as you start getting into that position of like, you start utilizing your sources of food better, well, you're unlocking Pandora's box of muscle gain at that point.
And all your athletes, like you said, like we'll call it recomp, but a lot of them are getting more shredded just by quote unquote do their nutrition, but their deficits, if they even get in a deficit, their calorie totals are higher than what they were at previous, and they're technically in a deficit, but they don't feel the same because Flux is higher. A lot of the times those deficits don't feel like deficits in the common sense when you have calories low, because there's still food, so you don't get the hunger as much and you don't get the fatigue, which is what most commonly held diets are.
I've got a female client, and this is probably the best example I have because it's just fresh in my mind. Her name's Jenna. She competes in powerlifting. I believe she's in her mid 30s. She started with me at 153. She competed at 148. Over the course, and didn't cut weight for that meet. So over the course of about 12 to 13 weeks, I kept her calories high. We only dropped them, I think, twice during that 13 weeks. But we got her Flux up to about 10,000 steps a day. Hit some crazy PRs at her meet, just walked into weigh-in. Okay. Now she's 151, but her maintenance calories are 750 per day higher.
Yeah, it's huge.
Than when she was 153 and came to me. She looks like a completely different person. She looks like she's lost about 10 to 15 pounds of fat. Mm-hmm. And she's like, yeah, I want to fill it to 165. I'm like, that's going to take a really long time doing what we're doing, but look how great you look. She fucking loves it.
Well,
and she's happier.
Yeah,
exactly.
Like she's eating food. Like she's living an actual life.
The benefit of these things is like the negative is like these weight class things become a dream, because now you're actually gaining the weight, and this comes for that pound to pound thing. Pound to pound, you're stronger. So now the old thought of you have to eat your way up in a weight class doesn't really fucking apply, because you're maximizing your muscle at the climb up. So getting 275 won't really give you those extra 3 pounds of muscle in that 300 pound total anymore if you do it the right way. So you can essentially perform the same way that you would for the people that are trying to eat their way up a weight class.
Here's the next piece is let's go back to Gen Pop.
Yeah.
So if you're in a high flux situation and it's Thanksgiving dinner,
you can't fail, right?
Bro. There is no way you could overeat enough to fuck up your diet.
Yeah.
In one meal.
Especially because
that's why we push it.
Yeah.
Because
and
we
you're
look
dealing
at
with
the
powerlifters. Like we're dealing with women and men, but Orange Theory Fitness is different than power. I know your workouts are a little bit different, but they can almost eat more calories sometimes than, like, I have some women, it's like insane. And it's like now they can't eat enough, which is that's the best solution possible for powerlifters and wanting to gain weight bad. But if I have somebody going Thanksgiving that couldn't gain weight.
Absolutely.
My mom's doing the
Absolutely.
same thing. She walks about 10 to 12,000 steps a day. She loves running. So she will, and loves weight training. So she weight trains 5 or 6 days a week, loves running, loves walking. So her steps are super high. She's weight training. She eats whatever she has some guidelines. She doesn't track her food. She makes sure she eats at least 4 times a day. Each meal has protein and vegetables. And then she eats carbs when she feels like she needs it. My mom's lost 40, like my mom has lost 25 pounds during COVID.
Yeah.
Well,
this is the dream for us. Like, that's who we're looking at. Like, we want them to be able to go out and have a cheeseburger and not worry about it ruining their week.
You want them to be the person they're jealous of. Like, it's that whole idea of like, this person can eat whatever they want. But every single time, I would almost say, like, for sure, that person generally is just one of those fucking fidgety movers who likes fucking Orange Theory Fitness. Is like, they literally just solve the problem by getting fluxed. But like, you can, I don't think it's unattainable. I think genetics plays a little bit of a part, but I think that is manageable to get there. And people think it's not because they think that person is just an anomaly. It's like, no, that person's, the correlation is there. Like, go fucking follow them. I can guarantee they move a lot. And they probably do some stupid fucking form of exercise, but it's perfect because they love it. Done. Game over.
Exactly.
Almost
Can we
every
pause
single
that? I have to pee.
You have to pee. We're gonna pause it. Oh,
yeah, pause it.
I think we should almost not pause it. Okay, you're back from your pee, and it's totally gonna like not cut it. It's just gonna be, I'm leaving for a pee, and now you're back for a pee. So you have the quickest pee of all time. And then Jeb and I started talking about how do we apply this stuff to.
What I was saying is where a lot of this kind of stems from is I work with some triathletes. When I say triathletes, I'm talking like Ironman competitors, like full on. Yep. And we actually have a really simple way of doing this that has almost nothing to do with planned anything. It's like I prescribe intra workout nutrition for them because they really, really need it because they'll bonk. And it basically adds, for a woman who's 110 pounds, who one of my main clients, she's a champ, but she's like 110 to 115 pounds, depending on where we're at in the season. And she might eat 700 or 800 calories on her run. She might have an extra, 1,000 calories that day on her like long bike. So she could have a day where literally her calories would be 1,800. She could have another day where they're 3,000.
Yep.
But like you pointed out earlier, it's all intra workout, and she's utilizing it. She's never gained weight on those 3,000 calorie days because they're all very strategically placed, and she's still probably averaging 2,300 calories at 110 pounds.
Is she already in shape? Because I'm thinking for a few people, but like I have a lot. Like, again, I'm not going to push exercise that I think is the best, but you'll have some runners. Can you get them to? The hard part is losing weight when they want to eat.
Runners is tough.
Runners is tough, and I'm wondering
if they're runners where they're running a 12-minute mile, and like she's an Ironman, 12-hour competition. Like she trains for 6 hours twice a week.
Well, this is where you can actually outwork that bad diet at that point. It's like the runners, like I have some good runners that like they can run enough, but it's still not enough to outwork it. But the steps can drive weight loss to a point, and then it's diet. It's like, fuck. But now I'm thinking I would just like make that workout. And I usually get them to bookend workout windows and do peri nutrition and stuff. But it's like nutrition still matters for some people at that point in terms of being in a real deficit, not just outworking shit and then eating like a shithead, which is nice.
I think when you're in a period of weight loss or weight gain, you kind of have to release your masters to a certain degree. So if I'm trying to lose weight and my flux is high, at some point I still have to decrease calories.
Yeah.
Right. And the same goes for weight gain. So what I end up doing is I have this kind of ballpark threshold of like, I continuously ask, how are you feeling? How are your workouts? Part of my check-in is, how is your training quality this week? And I want them to tell me, like, if you're struggling with your training, that's my cue to stop dropping your calories and just start upping your exercise.
Yeah.
Because sometimes what you'll end up doing, so there's we all have a bunch of tools, right? So we could introduce at that point, we could introduce a diet break. So if they've been dieting for a while, introduce a diet break. replenish those hormones, give it a week, give it maybe 2 weeks back at quote unquote some maintenance type calories. Sometimes, like I had a client last week, I gave him a diet break, he lost 2 pounds.
Yeah.
Because his flux is so much higher. But then you reintroduce the deficit, it spikes the weight loss again. Or if you don't want to go that route, you keep the calories where they are, you drive up the cardio. So introduce, okay, you get your 10,000 steps, let's do another 15 minutes steady state after training. Just 15 minutes, nice and easy, no harm, no foul. Where you run into trouble is time. And this is it's like, I don't have time for that. And that's the difference between a powerlifter and a gen pop, or a performance athlete and a gen pop. My people will make that time. They'll prioritize it however they need to do it.
Yeah, because well, not that they don't have any life, but like priorities take effect, and that's where absolutely
Yeah.
And identity, like you play into it. Yeah,
they play into it fully.
What I want to know is like that that variability between essentially, that was the overeating study. I know you guys watched that. But like some people reacted, their metabolism acutely fucking spiked. Those are the diet break people where I know for a fact Flux is going to work fucking 10 times better. But I'm wondering if overall Flux for a long period of time can influence that. Like if you've been in higher Flux for longer, I feel like the second you spike the metabolism or quote unquote diet break, they drop weight. I don't know how much of it is genetics. Like I'm just wondering, because although the studies fucking suck because they don't look at what that person is and they don't track any other metrics other than 1,000 calories overfeeding. So
it's also like it's a matter of time, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Like the weight vest experiment was like to mimic weight loss. You put a weight vest on, but it's how much time am I spending within this new lifestyle environment? So how much time am I spending driving up my flux? How much time, like if you only spend a couple weeks driving up your flux, you're not going to maintain any of those metabolic adaptations. And that's what it comes down to. It's an adaptation, just like any other one that we have. You introduce a stimulus, you get an adaptation. And then as soon as you reduce that stimulus or take it away, it's only going to last for a certain amount of time.
Yeah. Well, that's where it becomes lifestyle like everything else. And it's like, that was the Amish, is like, they didn't have any other choice. Cause it's like when money's on the line, you're fucking walking and farming and you don't have to, like, you have to do that. And that's where, at least with athletes, but with Gen Pop, you're trying to push that, not identity, somewhat identity, but like performance as a metric that they like, that they will do, because then that inherently will drive the time, but they have to like it. And I think that if they don't, those are the people that tend to have problems, where it's like, you're lucky, you're getting a population that performance matters. And I almost want people to get to a point where something matters that also checks the box of steps and exercise or steps and Flux, which family sometimes doesn't drive that enough. Like, oh, I want to be better for my family, or I want to be better health. Like that is not necessarily strong all the time.
Guess what? There's entire rehabs full of heroin addicts who want to get better for their family.
Yeah,
and guess
like,
what?
that's why I don't necessarily love the why stuff, because it's like it's just not like, if the goal is this thing, like sometimes it's not the strongest metric for like performance or exercise is helpful.
No, but that comes down to a lot of the stuff, Jeb, you talk about with like the relationship with food, the relationship with exercise, how you see this thing. If you see this lifestyle change, and that's exactly what it is, right? It's a lifestyle change. If you see that as a stressor, it's going to be much more challenging. So a lot of the motivational interviewing that I'm doing, a lot of the education that I provide is around seeing this as a means to improve your life, not something that should be taken away from it. And for the Gen Pop, like I do have a lot of Gen Pop clients. I'm doing the nutrition for one of my friend's mothers. She's 54 years old, she's 57 years old. She's eating 1,750 calories a day and she's lost 40 pounds.
Yeah.
I have adjusted her macros twice.
That's the thing. There shouldn't be a lot of adjustment. And I think there's this weird thing with Gen Pop clients, especially that we deal with. They're like, hey, am I going to change my numbers? Like, why?
No.
There's two reasons first of all, there's two reasons I'm not going to adjust your macros. One, because we both know you're not being adherent. So until you do these things, we're not going to change them. And two, if things are moving, why would we change anything that's working?
Well, that's where I use commonly held beliefs as my helpful thing. Cause it's like everyone associates diets with less food. People also associate diets with A, not working, B, less energy and more fatigue because like we're under eating and all this stuff. If I can like at least people like not being hungry and they like having energy. So it's like, that's usually how I use it to convince it, because those are commonly held beliefs. But we're fighting on both ends of the spectrum. So I just try to use the negatives of quote unquote dieting to then drive the flux, because it's like, it's an easy sell at that point. You can sleep better. Even if they don't, it's like they believe it. So it's like helpful.
We can no
believe it,
yourself into anything. Like
Yeah.
you can, it's that, even it's the whole idea of like, oh my God, I cheated on my diet, I'm going to gain weight, gain 3 pounds. It's like, had you just actually eaten the food, enjoyed every bite of it, left the meal happy that you had an experience with your friends and family, gone home, had a good night's sleep, woke up, go for a walk, weigh yourself. Who cares?
Boom, done.
Be done.
Well,
with
and
it.
that's where like flux does matter. And this is where it's like people hate tracking stuff, or like the other end of the spectrum. Like, you're going to have to track forever. It's like, no, it's just fucking helpful. It's like, if the only tool you're using to drive this thing, whether it's performance or weight loss or weight gain, is food. If you fuck up the food, which there's lots of opportunity to fuck that up, that whole thing is fucked. If you can still walk and you can still work out, you've at least hit 2 of the 3. And Jeb talks about adherence, but like, at least if you got that, you're probably less like, you have a bigger window of opportunity to be a fuck up. Because it's going to happen. If it's only food, even with powerlifters, if the only thing they're tracking is food and deficits, they fuck it up, because it's just, it's too easy. There's too many
That's
things.
why I give multiple metrics to track. So I give in my weekly check-ins, I have people fill out their macros every day, the hours of sleep, the number of steps, their daily body weight, and their perceived level of stress, their mood, and their training quality. And they're filling that out for me every week. So I'm getting a big picture of what's actually going on. They provide me context. They tell me like, okay, on this day I ran out of oats, so I had to eat, bread, and there's extra protein because of the bread, blah, blah, blah.
I have that problem right now. Ran out of oats. It's all brand cereal that's expired.
I can't eat it.
It works.
Oh, my stomach.
I know.
All brand cereal?
Well, it's the only thing in the cupboard. I was like, what the fuck is
You're gonna fucking shit yourself.
I don't have any Pop-Tarts anymore. So it's like, it's all brand expired. But
so it's like, that's a lot of things that, okay, maybe on a couple days you weren't fully adherent, but you slept your 7 to 9 hours, you got your 10,000 steps, you managed your stress really well this week, and your training's feeling great. That's okay. We'll keep your macros the same, and the weight will come down next week. I'm not worried about it at all. And educating them on those things of like, hey, like, even though you didn't do everything perfect, your weight came down a pound. So we're on the right track. And if you keep doing things better next week, even if it's not perfect, you're still going to come down.
That's it right there. It's like, if you just, right. Because it's not like you're changing
you get their lifestyle.
Yeah.
That's the main thing, is like, especially we have like people coming from other programs and stuff. It's like the coach, they didn't understand my lifestyle. I don't even have to, but I come off empathetic because I'm like, oh yeah, don't worry about it. And they just like, oh cool, this coach is cool with my lifestyle. It's like, no, I know it's fucking, I know the other stuff I'm doing. As long as you do that, I can appear empathetic, because I just don't give a shit now, which is easier. But it's true though.
I hope none of your clients ever listen to your podcast.
They don't. None of them do. They'll never get this far into it if they do, because like, honestly,
sticking point though, we talk Gen Pop and athletes. It's like, an athlete's not going to drink, it's going to help their performance. Gen Pop's going to drink, like, and I expect them to, as long as it's not like they're not fucking on a bender every weekend and it's a bad thing. Like, why can't you drink? And that's where a lot of the negative stigma comes from, is like, drinking is bad. It fucks your metabolism, blah, 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 blah. You know how many people lose weight drinking? Fucking a lot of them. Like Anthony, Anthony Harder, friend, when he was cutting for his photo shoot, he's fucking pounding a 2.6 twice on the weekend because he's single and he's partying, lost weight. So you know what? It's not the alcohol. He just
fuck him. He gets like shredded. Like,
this is that whole thing is like, eating less doesn't help. There's a lot of alcoholics who are very skinny. There's a lot of meth heads who are very skinny. You know what? Like, maybe
meth is one thing.
But listen, they're in a deficit.
But like, let's like kind of back to the joke where Dean's like, I don't give a shit. But like, there is this thing of like, when people tell me like, I did this, I did that, and Gen Pop, and I'm like, I don't give a shit. Like, I really don't care what you eat. And the reason is because it doesn't really matter to me. As long as you're doing what you do with intention. Did you decide you wanted to go out and eat a pizza? cool. Fucking great. If that's what you decided to do, good for you, but fucking own it.
Yep.
Don't come to me and be like, oh no, I didn't lose any weight, but I ate a pizza. Well, guess what? That's what happens.
Yeah,
That's
except
just
that
what
your
happens.
choices have consequences.
Yeah. And
we have a bit of a magic bullet though. Like this is where it's like, I don't care. And it's not a magic bullet. It's like, there's no best answer, but I can literally say, because I know how to do this shit, is that you can probably do that and lose weight because we're doing this. So at least there's now a choice. It's like, well, before this person said, if I do this, it'll wreck my hormones and whatever, and I can't lose weight. It's like, you definitely can. You just have to work hard at something. And whether that's steps or exercise, but like you can have both. It's just, you gotta work. You've got to work
in some capacity.
That's powerful. I can eat pizza and lose weight. Yeah, but you got to work. If food's your only metric, no, you can't eat pizza. You can do whatever the fuck you want, but it ain't going to help.
The other big piece that I really like about the Flux model is because it puts so much ownership on the person, it gives them agency over their process.
Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%.
And easy metrics to do it. Like steps is fucking easy. I don't have to coach that.
Yeah, they're in full control of more factors. And the more agency you provide somebody, typically the more invested they'll become in the process. Mm-hmm. So if they know that every day they have certain big rocks that they have to turn over, that serves as like the anchor to hold them in place where they are in terms of their like stability. Mm-hmm. So when you talk about like, you know, having a cheat meal or deciding to overeat one day, well, that's just one element of all of these of your ecosystem of 10 elements that we're doing on a daily basis. You might be off kilter over here, but you still maintain control over here. So overall, your ship is still on course. And once they become invested and once you've got them hooked and they know, like, I get this all the time, especially within the first 2 weeks of introducing Flux, because sometimes I'll even start people in like a surplus of what they used to be eating because the food quality will drive their TEF up. Yeah. I haven't lost any weight, but I really feel like I'm recomping. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, no, you're fucking not.
Or they're full.
But you do feel your glycogen's full. You have less digestive waste in your stomach, and all the water is out of your skin and into your muscles. You probably feel jacked.
That's the most powerful. I find that if you can somehow do that, like, again, they feel like they're eating more or they feel more full and they hadn't lost or they lose just slightly, then it's game over. Like now that's the easiest.
And occasionally I've had people where they never send pictures, nothing, and their weight never changes. And they keep telling me that I feel. And then 12, 16 weeks later, I get a picture and I'm like, holy shit. And dude is the same weight and went from being soft and like all of a sudden now is just shredded to high hell. And it's like, okay, I guess you were doing it. And they're the outliers, but
there is people like that. And that's where it's like, this is like why I brought Paul on, because you actually have clients, because we see a lot of this basic info. But we have a lot of this basic info, even about high flux, because it's not that big. So people are like, oh, you got to eat more and move more. Like, you don't have a fucking clue because you never actually done it yourself or with anyone. Mm-hmm. So it's like we can have these conversations of this person didn't lose weight, and we could talk about outliers because we've actually had outliers. We're not talking about theoretical outliers in a study or something your friend said. It's like, like, I'm pretty confident in these things because I've done it, which is helpful to, like, when we're talking about it, because everyone talking about it doesn't fucking do it. So I don't really give a shit about their opinion.
What I will say though, dude, is if they're adherent and if they are hitting their steps, if they are somewhat consistent on their macros, there are zero outliers. No one doesn't lose weight and no one doesn't achieve the goal that they've set, because it is 100% in their control. They get invested right off the bat, that their flux picks up, they're turning over more nutrients, all that scientific mumbo jumbo kicks in. Every single one of my clients loses weight. And that's not a pat on my back.
No.
That's just a factor of, is like, this fucking works.
Well, and that's why at this point it's like, it kind of is observational. And this is where, like, we've done Ben's course, and like, it's like hard because we can't talk about it in hard facts because there's only a few studies on it. But it's like, if you kind of combine a bunch of stuff, it's like, and look at populations, it's like, let's just say you're dealing with a population and Jeb and I are dealing with more of a population. And it's like, on a population level, when we use our fucking brain, like, it's hard for me to say it doesn't work. Now, I'm going to say worse because I'm going to be, we have our own podcast. I can say whatever the fuck I want, but it's hard because a lot of the people talking about these absolutes or not absolutes, or this doesn't, it's observational, or whatever, like they don't actually deal with it. So it's hard for them to speak on observation because they don't actually have their own observations. They've observationally looked at data. They haven't had any actual observational coaching data working with people. So it's like, honestly, and no one's saying it doesn't work. This is the cool thing with high flux and why I like it, is because no one's going to argue with you that movement's better, that exercise is better, and that driving calories up without losing weight or with losing weight is a bad thing. Like, everyone's going to agree on that. So they can't fucking combat you. What are they going to say? This is bad. What's bad?
The key to everything is that person that's in front of you, right?
Yeah.
It all comes down to adherence and getting that person to a place where they can follow these guidelines on a consistent basis day after day, and more often than not flip over those big rocks. The science is all cool, and this is something where I've kind of changed my approach a little bit. Is I used to demand adherence and I used to fucking pry on it all the time, and it wasn't until I softened and started listening to people and figuring out how to unlock their psychology to a place where they're willing and open and asking me for more, that they were able to get to where they needed to be. And that's why the person-to-person approach really kind of fascinates me a lot, and it's where I invest a lot of my learning now at this point, and in the coaching, field, is how do I get if I know this thing works, how do I get even the toughest, most stubborn, least committed person to hit the numbers? And it comes down to meeting them where they are. For me, it's like, okay, you're not willing to track. Cool. Let's put in some guidelines. The steps we can track, even if you're not tracking on with a Fitbit.
You can track it. You got a cell phone.
Accumulate 40 minutes of walking a day. And then next week, if you got your 40 minutes a day, it's going to go to 45. And it doesn't have to be any harder than that. And then your rules for the diet can be, okay, you can eat 4 times a day with protein at each meal. Those are your rules. That's our core. I feel like
we're going to have to start a cult, dude. This is where it's like, this whole thing was like, remember when our parents, like my mom, my mom doesn't listen to this, but she's like, steps is the thing, blah, 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 blah. And she got 10,000 steps. She still gets it. Now I don't argue with her, but it's like, it's like, we're saying it's the holy grail, but like, I don't know. Like it kind of, it's very helpful.
I think this is kind of a good place to kind of wrap up here, because I think what we come down to is, you said it. You used to demand adherence.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, what's the best way to get people to just adhere? Give them a bunch more food, show them results, and just do it in a way that's less restrictive. Because all of a sudden, the bumpers went from here to here, because maybe they're 1,000 calories under today, and maybe they're 1,000 calories over tomorrow, but they're in this state where they're in high flux, that it all kind of balances out and they end up with a great result. And granted, this isn't our goal, but if we drive this place where there's these big wide bumpers and people are able to live inside of them, they're going to be able to adhere to a better model.
And then you don't sound like the fucking loser on the precision nutrition forums that say you're not giving them enough food, they're in a starvation mode. It's like, no, like, we're going to think about this thing a little bit deeper than your fucking stupid metaphor that's not real. And like, we're actually just using our brains to do this. It's not them eating more food because they're starving. It's like, shut the fuck up. But that is a thing. Like, that's why I want to talk about this in like a realistic, this is what this is. This isn't starvation mode. They don't need more calories. Like, you're a fucking idiot. But you need to know these things, because most coaches won't do it. They won't touch it. And then when they do it, they're like, all I did was I gave them more calories and I got them out of starvation mode, and fucking all these magical things happen. It's like, no, you don't even understand what you did, you idiot. You're on precision nutrition.
The average person has between 2 and 3 months worth of adipose tissue on their body. You are not in starvation mode.
So let's here's how I want to like kind of wrap this up and circle back, because I want to know, like, I want to wrap back up and come back and talk about this after you compete at 198 and see how this but like, seriously, like I wouldn't mind doing like a kind of like every couple months or so, like just kind of, because I think because we're all in this in a
And it's
boots
new.
on the ground kind of way,
Yeah.
like I think we're going to be constantly seeing new things and just being able, like, and I don't care if anyone listens to it for my own personal like growth. I want to talk to you about
because
this.
we're living
regularly
in
and see in a performance way.
We're living in observation land at this point.
Yeah.
It's tough because I'm not a fucking scientist PhD and I'm not doing this shit. And so it's cool because, again, now I don't want to become dangerous where, like, I know this thing works. Like, I'm that fucking dude, but it's like, like I can reasonably say, like, hey, I'm going to do it this way. Fuck you.
Okay. So on that note, this might wrap it up totally, because it's like, this works for our application. We've seen it work, and it's our preferred method of accomplishing a goal.
Yeah.
It comes down to same thing with periodization models. Same thing with, progressive overload models. There are many ways to roam. This is the way that I've felt I'm able to communicate what I need to communicate to my clients in a way where they take ownership and agency over what they're doing. They see results. They're happy with them. I get what I need in terms of results and output for my clients. They maintain their weight loss or weight gain, and they live healthier. They're happier. If that works for me,
brought you on. You're very reasonable.
But if that's, I'm trying. But if that's not how you like to do it, if your way is heavy calorie restriction and complete adherence to 0.7 macros a day, and that's what you do, and you're able to get results with your clients, that's awesome.
No, fuck that person.
But you know what? But here's my caveat to all of that is, show me that person 5 years from now.
Absolutely.
Because
100%.
we are so great at losing weight. We are terrible at maintaining weight loss.
You should have did my presentation for me. I would have been like, fuck that person. And like literally but that person's fucking rich because they kept taking their money and they came back. Like, anyways, okay, no, where do people find you? And I know you're pretty, you may be transitioning. Well,
yeah, I might be transitioning. So I'm in the process of continuing to build my coaching business at masterathletic.com. And I just started an Instagram page for the company after 5 years. At Master Athletic Performance.
At Master Athletics, okay.
We're not talking about this is the cool thing is like we're talking about coaches who have had clients, and like Jim and I can say in the hundreds, but like you're not just this dude that has like 5 clients. Like you've had. No,
so my coaching. I started coaching at as a professional coach in 2010 when I moved to the US. I worked at 3 different universities, and then I've been a head strength coach here in Canada. And then I've been running my own business since 2015, coaching athletes in training, strength and conditioning, powerlifting, nutrition.
And a large
have a couple physique clients. Yeah, pretty good roster right now. I got a couple top 10 all-time lifters. And so Master Athletic Performance is my coaching business. You can find me on Instagram at Paul Oneid, PAULONEID. And that's pretty much where I share my training and some thoughts that I have on the day. I'm also have a couple new projects in the go for 2021. I'll be kind of spreading more information about that soon. One's going to be like a group coaching kind of program, to be able to have more of an educational model around my strength and conditioning coaching. And then I also have an app called MetriLife, which I've been on to talk about with my business partner. So at MetriLife _ METRILIFE _ or at metrilife.com. And that's a intelligent approach to help people live healthier, happier, and stronger. It's more of a lifestyle tracking app.
Sweet. Okay.
It's me, man.
I like that you've got the weight cut option for there on your website, like for people that are just going into meet prep. That's pretty sweet. That's cool. I like that.
It's actually it's pretty popular. Like a lot of people,
I'm sure,
work with me for a week, help me cut this weight, and so we do daily weigh-ins. We'll start off with like some macros for a couple of days, water loading, depending on how they need to get there. We'll get there. And the clients that I coach for nutrition will get that as well if they're competing and they want to cut weight. I usually try to avoid it, but people are going to be people, you know.
Yeah, but you know what? Like, it's, hey, you charge a premium for it, and you'll be like, hey, I'm gonna, and then hopefully those people will turn into nutrition clients, so they don't have to do a big water cut.
You just can't take our hashtags. Was get fluxed? And,
Get fluxed. Yeah.
No,
we want them to use the hashtag. We want to grow
that's
it.
true. You just have to say like.
I'm actually 100% on weight cuts so far. I've never had a client.
Another one is like go flux yourself.
Yeah, I like go flux yourself. That's another good one.
Seriously, yeah.
Yeah, we're just gonna fucking I love it because I mean it's just such a good
Fluxing
word.
nuts. Like it's all fucking, but it's helpful because anyways, okay, I'm ending this.
That's right. I have wrestled with an alligator. I done tussled with a whale. I done handcuffed lightning, throw thunder in jail.
You can't stop me.
I'm going to win.
It ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward.
I won't quit.
I'll just keep getting stronger.
Stronger.
Stronger.